Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to the Falcoholic Podcast, Falcons versus Panthers. Wow. Week 8 game preview. As you can tell, we haven't played the Panthers yet. I apparently haven't remembered how to say Panthers this year, but I'm joined by someone who definitely knows how to say Panthers and knows a lot about the Carolina Panthers. He is Desmond Johnson at Des_3505 on Twitter, host of the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast and a radio show, The Rundown with Desmond Johnson, which is Desmond, tell the people where they can find your radio show as well.
Yeah, so the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast is on the Bleav podcast network. That is 10 a.m. to 12 noon Saturday mornings across the Triad, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point Market, and on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. You can stream it no matter where you are. That's my, well, excuse me, I did that in reverse. The Rundown with Desmond Johnson is on Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 noon here in the Triad. You can get that at TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. The Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast is on every major podcast platform through the Bleav Podcast Network, Spotify, Google, iTunes, Stitcher, all the luminary, all the big ones there. So just search Bleav in Carolina Panthers and you'll be able to find us.
All right, excellent stuff. A lot to get to with the Panthers. Definitely things moving in a more positive direction after last week. Carolina took down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in dominating fashion, 21-3. Very surprising outcome, obviously, and I think the biggest upset of the season so far. I believe Carolina was 13.5-point underdogs on Sunday. So yeah, which is even crazier. I mean, that type of line I think is really disrespectful. I mean, the Panthers were playing well, but it's not like they were getting blown out every week or anything like that. So PJ Walker goes in. The offense looks functional, looks maybe even good. His stat line reminds me a little bit of like the Falcons passing game, where not a lot of yardage, but efficient, some scores. We'll start with that. PJ Walker has been named the starter for this week. I guess Baker Mayfield may have been available. They've been sort of, I guess, tight-lipped about that. But either way, they're going with PJ Walker. What do you think about that transition, and what do you think about PJ Walker?
I'm cool with it as long as they give him the game plan they've been giving him. I think the main issue was that offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo was kind of in the beginning of the season, really kind of rolling Baker Mayfield out there without training wheels and just kind of opened up the whole playbook. Dude had learned the plays in like 2 months or whatever. Just never fit. They were running RPO with Baker Mayfield, like it just things that were comical. And with PJ, instead of having this huge playbook and then having to shrink it down, they started off with it shrunken down, and now they're starting to add things to it. And there's a huge difference there. I'll be the first to admit, and I've admitted it on the Bleav podcast earlier in the year, I was clowning PJ Walker. It was like, what are you doing here? Like, the only reason why you're here is because of your relationship with Matt Rule, him being your college coach. He was the 4th string quarterback.
Right. I think if Corral hadn't been injured, he probably would have got cut, right?
He was days from being cut. It was right after, I think it was the end of the 3rd preseason game. If Corral hadn't hurt his foot, actually, I think it was week 2 of the preseason. Corral got hurt, and then Darnold got hurt in week 3. And just through just being here, rose from being the 4th string quarterback to the backup quarterback. Then Baker tears a ligament in his ankle, and all of a sudden PJ Walker's the starter. And like I said, he would have been cut because they weren't going to keep 4 quarterbacks, and they weren't going to drop Corral, who they just traded up in the 3rd round to draft. They weren't going to drop Sam, and they weren't going to drop Baker, who they just brought in. So that left PJ Walker out there, and now he's the starter. So, I've apologized to PJ publicly for clowning him earlier in the year. I do think that it's an opportunity for the Panthers to expand the playbook back out again this week. We didn't see any RPO last week, and I think that they might add that wrinkle to the offense now that PJ's getting a little bit more comfortable taking all the first string snaps in practice. He knows he's going to be the starter. But the game plan was primarily rely on the run game, let that open up play action, and just kind of go from there. Don't make mistakes, and trust your receivers. He was throwing some ropes on Sunday that I didn't expect him to throw. There was a toe tap by DJ Moore in the back of the end zone for our first score. He hit Tommy Tremble in the corner of the end zone in a spot where nobody but Tommy could get to it. So I feel pretty confident with PJ going forward. And the schedule is not that daunting when we look at it. It's like, I think at the beginning of the year we were looking at like, oh, these are going to be the hot spots.
Yeah.
But that's not the case in the NFL. I don't know why we do it to ourselves every year. We look at like
it's the same thing with the Falcons. Like for preseason, it was like, oh, they have the hardest schedule. Now it's like, oh, they have the easiest schedule.
Yeah, it's like,
wow. Yeah.
Well, I think the problem is that we use last year's teams to kind of do that, which makes zero sense. It's like none of these teams are the same. So why are we saying it's going to be a hard matchup to play the Saints or whatever? And they're basing it off of what the Saints did last year with last year's roster, last year's coach. Like it's not even the same team, but we're basing strength of schedule off of that. So that's always bothered me. But back to your original question with PJ, we feel pretty good about PJ because PJ won't have to do it alone. There's other parts of the team that will be looked at to step up more so than PJ to come away with a road victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think the offensive line had been playing better than expected, and you would have thought that the receivers would have been bigger factors because DJ Moore certainly no slouch. You know, the talent was there, but very anemic passing game up until last week, basically one of the worst in the league statistically. So some life here with PJ Walker. We'll see if that was just one good game or if that's something that can be sustained, but you have to like that version of the offense better than I think that was only their third highest scoring outing so far, but I think it was the highest yardage output.
That didn't surprise me. The stench of Matt Rule is still, you know, you can spray aerosol cans and get all that and get them out the room, but there's still kind of linger in there. I always thought it was funny. My friends that aren't Panthers fans throughout the year would be like, well, you know, you guys can't score because you don't have talent. There's not enough talent on this team, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there going, I've been covering this team for 3 years in depth. Skylar Callahan's one of my co-hosts. He's a Sports Illustrated beat writer for the Panthers. So he's in the building like 3-4 times a week. And we're both just like, the talent's not the problem. They've been drafting very well the past 3 years, especially the last 2 with Scott Fitter at GM. The talent's not the issue. It was the coach and the schemes and what they were asking them to do each week. And once that went away, it's almost like a weight has been lifted from off of Panthers Nation in terms of just knowing what to expect going into Sunday. If I know what my team is going to run on Sunday, like almost to the play, then I'm pretty sure the defensive coordinator on the other side knows what we're going to do and has a game plan to stop it. And literally, we would watch the same script every game. Carolina would play a team tight, no matter how good that other team was. Somewhere in the third, fourth quarter, Carolina gets a lead. And then in the fourth quarter, that other team has like an 8-9 minute offensive drive that just leaves our defense out there for like the whole quarter. They take a lead. Carolina runs out of time. They lose by 4. They lose by 3. They lose by possession. And that was the script every week for 2 years under Matt Rule. They just never could figure out a way to get over it. And it turns out it was because Matt Rule was the hump. Like, he was the hump. You moved him out the way, and then now things can go a little bit smoother. And this Panthers team's playing loose, man. I would say that they are a dangerous squad because they have nothing to lose. And right now, they're playing basically for jobs. They're playing for Coach Wilks is really what they're doing. Like, they have rallied around interim head coach Steve Wilks. They want him to get the permanent job, and I want him to get it too. He deserves it. He understands Panther culture, which Matt Rule did not, and that was very evident. Wilks, just real quick, one of the things he did last week before they played the Bucs, he sat the whole team down and he rolled a clip of multiple clips of NFC South teams playing against the Panthers, just to kind of show how important the division games were. Matt Rule wouldn't have done anything like that. Like, the players perk up for something like that, because that's like, you understand Panther culture. Like, you understand what it's about in this building at BOA. It's not about Matt Rule. It's not about what I want to do. It's about us. Like, it's us versus everybody. And they've bought in. So, like, this is a very young, hungry, dangerous unit because they have nothing to lose. No one's expecting them to do anything at this point. Half the talking heads on TV keep saying that they're tanking the season, which has never been their intent. So I'd be very careful if a team came across this Panther team right now, because there's not really, you don't know what you're going to get in terms of what they're going to try to do. So it should be interesting on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the chance that a team, overlooks the Panthers is a lot lower after watching what they did last week. If they had another flat performance like they did against the Rams, against the Bucs, then, I think it's easier for teams to sort of write the Panthers off. But you get a win like that against a division rival, a team that was thought to be a contender. It seems like that's not the case anymore this year. Now it's like, oh, well, this team is dangerous. Like, they're, And that's sort of how I felt about the Falcons last year, and even to some extent this year. It's like nobody's expecting you to do anything, so you're playing with house money. You know, you're just going out there. You know, you got a lot of young players, especially, you know, Atlanta's like that. Got a lot of guys on 1-year deals, a lot of young players, a lot of veterans, you know, coming off disappointing rookie contracts. It's like, okay, show us that you're going to be a part of this team for the future, earn a new contract here. And that sort of makes I think it helps the team play looser, like you said. Nobody's, you know, expecting great things from you, so you're sort of liable to yourself. It's like everyone's betting on themselves when they decide to sign with a team like Atlanta or Carolina, knowing that, you know, playoffs probably not like they're not favored to make the playoffs. So you're not here competing for a Super Bowl. You're here to show that you belong in the NFL and deserve a new contract and deserve a longer look from either this team or another team. And you know, Panthers seem like maybe they're in a similar situation to Atlanta, maybe a year behind schedule because they elected not to move on from a coaching staff that was clearly past due last year. But I do think that especially on defense, like the architecture for a good defense is there, clearly. And it hasn't necessarily been there this year. Some of that certainly has to do with the offense turning the ball over a lot and just not really helping them out. You know, football is something that requires both sides to play well, and if one side's awful, the other side can't really look that good, even if they're very talented. But this is a young squad in Carolina that I think has a lot of potential. And speaking of the trades, you do trade away Christian McCaffrey for what was really good compensation, so I certainly don't blame them for making that trade. There's been buzz about DJ Moore, which seems unlikely, and then there's been buzz about Brian Burns. Are those trades that you would be cautious will happen, would be interested in making? Any players that you would like to see Carolina continue to move, or do you think that they sort of just took the McCaffrey trade because the value was so good?
I think they took the McCaffrey trade because of the value, and I think David Tepper is wired more so as an investment banker than he is an owner of an NFL franchise, in terms of he looks at things in terms of gains and losses of value. And they had just extended Christian McCaffrey. It was the first year of his extension. He's getting like $12 million a year, which is pretty high for a running back in today's NFL, although Christian McCaffrey wasn't exactly a running back, so it was justifiable. And I think David Tepper looked at it like, well, I haven't had his services for the past 2 years for the most part. How much do I need to pay this position? And if we're going to do something with him, let's do it now while he's healthy. It's funny, you know, people were talking about the Carolina offense. I still, to this day, 2 weeks ago when they played the Rams, I will still stick to this. I feel like they threw that game away and did it to showcase Christian McCaffrey to raise his trade value. Because if you go back and look at the highlights of that game, they did not try to throw the ball downfield, but once the entire game, it was all to the side. Heavy Christian McCaffrey. He was like 80% of the offense that day. And come to find out after the fact that they had already started talking to San Francisco and Los Angeles to maybe trade McCaffrey before that game. And then talks intensified after that game. So to me, I look at it like, okay, they decided, okay, to do this completely, if we're really going to do it, let's do it in this game. It's a away game. We can spotlight McCaffrey, show he's healthy, and then move on from there. And yeah, they got a nice haul from him. I was a little upset about it in my feelings because I like Christian McCaffrey, you know. But about the end of the first quarter this past Sunday, I was watching the game and I realized, you know, honestly, I haven't watched McCaffrey with the Panthers in 2 years. Like, I've kind of gotten used to him not being there. So once I realized, like, well, we've already seen what it looks like without him. Let's just kind of go take this step by step and see what happens. I began to enjoy the game more instead of worrying about that McCaffrey had been there to do that. It had been different. And it helps when the running game has their best running game of the year without McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Bradley Bozeman had a lot to do with that. Ike Ekwonu had a lot to do with that. It was the best game the offensive line's played all year. Bozeman's now the starting center because Pat Elflein got put on IR with a hip injury, and he was the catalyst. He really was the catalyst. If you've got a center that knows what they're doing, they're the brain of that offensive line. And Bozeman, they just imposed their will on Tampa's defensive line, and that hasn't really happened in 2 years. They're really known for the run defense, and it was non-existent last Sunday. I know Tampa's going through it. They got a lot of injuries all over the place. 45-year-old quarterback that might not want to be there anymore, but just can't tell anybody because of how he came back. So it was kind of a perfect storm. So I'm curious to see how we are with a different team other than that Tampa team, because we kind of felt like we could get them at home. But this will be a true test for Coach Wilks on the road with this unit. But they're willing to run through some walls for Coach Wilks. So this is a different situation than what it would have been a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, for sure. And, you get Tampa probably overlooking the Panthers a lot. I think Tampa probably still thought they were this contender, and they've been thinking that every week. They're like, we're going to get out of this funk, whatever. And then they get to play Carolina, and Carolina's not rolling over for them, and in fact, they're taking it to them. And I think they probably caught the Bucs sleeping a little bit. And we'll hope, well, certainly Falcons fans will hope that the Atlanta doesn't take them lightly. I mean, I don't think the Atlanta is a team that can take anyone lightly, so hopefully they wouldn't.
I don't think anybody's division can take anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had to choose one team in this division to win this division today, who would you pick?
I mean, I would probably go with the Falcons just because I'm a homer, but that's the only thing that, it's like, I think you could pick anybody. So, yeah, like, because it's a toss up, I just go with the Falcons. But, yeah, I mean, the Bucs don't.
It's like 2014, kind of.
Yeah,
when everybody was under 500.
Yeah.
The Panthers won that division already.
Yeah, 7-8-1. Yep.
Yeah, they were 3-8-1 at the beginning of December. Like, they went on a 4-game win. Well, it was a 5-game win streak to end the year. Finished 7-8-1, won the division, won the playoff game against Arizona. And people forget in that playoff game, the Panthers still hold the record for fewest yards allowed in an NFL playoff game in history, was in that playoff game. And more importantly, it set up their 2015 season when they went 15-1, ran to the Super Bowl, Cam's MVP year, Rivera coach of the year, all that stuff. It all happened from off of that year before they kind of found themselves. And I'm kind of waiting to see which team does that in this division, because that's going to be the team that separates from the rest of them. And I don't trust the Saints. I don't trust Tampa. I haven't seen Atlanta yet. So it's like, there's a shot here. Like, it's wide open. Any of these four teams could end up getting going, but everybody's moving in different directions, like with their quarterbacks and stuff. The Saints just bench Winston. So, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's a good, segue into talking about the matchups here. And, the Falcons are sort of they've completely flipped the script from last year from what they were. They were with Matt Ryan, they were throwing the ball, and they were completely incapable of running even when they wanted to. This year, they're barely throwing the ball. I think they're the lowest in the NFL in terms of pass attempts, or at least they're 31st technically. They've only passed the ball 150 times. They're last in the league in passing yardage. Well, or close to it, certainly. But they've been very efficient when they have thrown. They're 13th in yards per attempt. And they're just running the ball, like, really well. Way better than anyone would have predicted because, like I said, they were the 31st rushing offense last year. They're 4th in yardage, averaging almost 5 yards a carry. They didn't run particularly well last week against the Bengals. I know a lot of people are chalking that up to the Bengals defense. It's a difficult team to play against. But it's completely changed. So the Falcons are very different looking, certainly, than they have been in years past. But I think we'll start with the Falcons' sort of passing game against Carolina's secondary. I know there's been a lot of moving parts there. Some guys have been hurt. Some guys are coming back. I think it appears that maybe J.C. Horn will be back for this game. I know Carolina has some talent in the secondary, certainly. But I'm curious how these guys have played outside of Horn, because we haven't really had much of a chance to see him this year. The Falcons do have some talent with Drake London, with Olamide Zaccheaus, who's really stepped up, and obviously Kyle Pitts, but the volume hasn't been there. How do you feel about the Panthers secondary's ability to match up with those guys?
Honestly, I think the Panthers secondary room is the strongest position group that they have. Dante Jackson had limited practice on Wednesday. Actually, they just updated the Thursday injury report here. So Dante Jackson was a full participant in practice on Thursday. So got one side of your cornerback tandem there. J.C. Horn was limited in practice. So that'll probably be questionable on Sunday. That's your starting cornerback group there. And then Xavier Woods, safety that we picked up in the offseason, has played really well. He's healthy. Jeremy Chin, of course, is on IR. He'll be off in a couple of weeks. He's one of our young stars back there too. So I feel pretty good with the secondary, to be honest. They've actually been the bright spot from the past couple of years. They were one of the top pass defenses in the league last year when Phil Snow was still the defensive coordinator. So I feel pretty good, especially considering the Falcons don't throw it very often. It feels like you guys are run first, run second, run third type of team. So if they do decide to go to the air, I feel pretty confident that the Panthers can win those particular matchups with the wide receivers that you guys have.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The Falcons not really going to test good secondaries very much. They're going to try to hit play action and hit deep shots and go to some stuff off of the run game. And that brings me to the next topic, which is the Falcons rushing attack versus the Panthers run defense. Statistically, right around average in terms of overall, but I think in terms of the yardage, Panthers like 21st in rushing yardage allowed, but they've been better on a per carry basis. How do you feel about that matchup? The Falcons coming in as the 4th ranked rushing attack, and they'll try to get to 40 attempts if they can. So,
yeah, I think that the Panthers rushing attack is what Steve Wilks envisions the Panthers rushing attack to ultimately become. I'm looking at the rushing yards per game. It's a bit skewed because Carolina wasn't running the ball very well at the beginning of the year, so they're averaging 102 yards per game. And like you said, Atlanta is 4th in the league at 156. I think the team that gets to 150 rushing yards first wins this football game. I don't think both teams can do that. But I know both teams can do it. I just don't think they both will do it in the same game together. Whoever gets there first is probably going to win this matchup because I think it kind of sets up where these are almost mirror images of each other in terms of statistically where they are and what they're trying to do. Can't go wrong with trying to, base your entire system around a run game and stopping the run. That's never going to go out of style, regardless of what level of football you play. If you can do those two things, you're going to win more often than you lose. So I would probably lean towards Atlanta in that situation just because they've been doing it all year, and the Panthers are still kind of figuring out identity-wise what they want to be. So it could be a good time to catch them there. Although I will say they have begun to play with a bit more juice on defense than they were before because Steve Wilks and Al Holcomb have taken over the defense. I can't confirm it, but it had been rumored that Phil Snow and Steve Wilks kind of clashed in terms of defensive philosophies. Phil Snow wanted the smaller, quicker linebackers that he could interchange in and out and put in different positions. Steve Wilks was like, yo, that's cool, but in the 4th quarter, those small, quick linebackers get tired and we start missing tackles, and that's how we lose football games. Maybe Tepper felt like that Wilks was right because Wilks is here and Snow is not. So, we started seeing a little bit of a difference with personnel last week. I would expect that to continue to emphasize Wilks' point of being able to play all 4 quarters as opposed to the first 3. But in that situation, I would give it to Atlanta's run game.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. I think the Falcons are going to try to pound the rock, and so it's sort of up to the Panthers to be able to stop them. When the Falcons have run the ball really well, they've been pretty unstoppable on offense, and when they haven't run the ball well, they've lost. So that's going to be a crucial matchup for Carolina. I know a lot of linebackers injured and limited, but nobody being held out at this point. So it doesn't seem like Frankie Louvu or any of these other guys are going to potentially, Littleton was, I think, limited on Wednesday. So I don't think there's a lot of concern about those guys missing the game, but maybe a little bit banged up heading into this one.
Yeah, everybody's dinged up a little bit, but I would expect them all to play. Derek Brown, Tommy Tremble, J.C. Horn, they all grew up in Georgia. So I would imagine that they're going to definitely try to make sure that they're on the field for this game. But yeah, so the Atlanta rushing team, or the Atlanta rushing attack is what worries me the most about everything. The last team we really played this year that had a heavy emphasis on running the ball was the Browns week 1. And we didn't really gang tackle the way we needed to. We've done better since that week. It's kind of hard to kind of compare Carolina's stats to where they are now because that team was a different team than what they are now. It's like they literally have hit a reset button. They're 1-0. Like they don't care about the first 5 games or whatever. They feel like if they can win the majority of these next 10, 11 games that they have on the plate, they can win the division and do something special this year. So they're not even looking at stat-wise what they did before, and that could be a bit misleading for others to look at it and go, oh, well, the Panthers don't do this, they don't do that. They're not even doing the same stuff as they were doing 3 weeks ago in terms of scheme. So I don't really know how to compare how well they are compared to what they were doing in September, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And it's, it's a different team in terms of what they're going to play like, not necessarily the different personnel. So it's really going to be testing how can a coaching change impact that? And, historically, this is very common for teams that fire a coach, right? They do get a little bit of a bump afterwards. It's sustaining it that seems to be the challenge. So I am curious, certainly, to see if this positivity holds out. Obviously, I hope it does, just not in the weeks that you guys play the Falcons. So.
And we got you guys 3 weeks.
Yeah. So after that, good luck to you. But
I will say the ESPN Plus article plus the video that the Panthers put out post game of last week tells a huge story. So, like, for people on the outside looking in, that all they see is that Matt Rule got fired. From that article, there was a cloud over the franchise because of the previous 2 years, and it got to the point where that 49er game 2 weeks ago was the culmination of it, where the majority of the fans in Bank of America Stadium were wearing maroon and gold, and you could see it on TV. It was red, like, all in there, and that visual was probably the final straw. But in that article, it talks about the practice the next day where they were lining up for routine 7-on-7s, and Coach Rule and his coaching staff, they're just kind of standing there watching it, and there was no life to the practice, missed balls going short, balls going too far, just missed assignments. It just was a sloppy, uninspired practice, and the coaches said nothing during the practice. They just stood there on the sideline, just kind of watched the whole thing, and a little bit later when they were meeting, Rule comes in from a side door, starts talking to him, and then drops on him that, he's been let go. He wishes he could be here to see them grow, all this other stuff. But from that moment on, when they named Wilks interim head coach, it's like a weight was lifted from all these players, like a dark cloud. So now they're playing with this like looseness that they probably haven't played with since high school, where it's like, no one expects anything from us. We know we have the talent in this room to do some stuff. They don't even know what we're going to run. They don't know who's going out. They don't know. No one knows. There's no tape on what they're going to do, really. So it's going to be kind of a surprise. It'll be a surprise to us. And we cover the team every week. Like, we don't know exactly what they're going to do, but we trust Steve Wilks. And I feel like the video where David Tepper comes in the locker room and gives the game ball to Coach Wilks after he had just given a game ball to PJ Walker, and you hear the emotion from the team when he gets that game ball for Wilks. And Wilks is like he's near tears at that point. This is one game. This has been one game, one Sunday against a 45-year-old quarterback at home. And the emotion in that room it was almost like a release of just like the past couple of years with Carolina and the results they were getting, to be able to go out there and do that against that team that's tormented them for the past couple of years in the division with Tom Brady. I feel like that's going to be the thing that gets them going. You were asking if they could get it going the next week. I don't think this was a thing where it was just like a 1 week thing and then they're done. I think this is more of a building. Like, it'll get bigger. Like, the more they win, the more they'll start believing in Coach Wilks and what he's doing. Plus, he's a Panther. He's been here before. Like, he understands what it means to be a Carolina Panther. Matt Rule never understood that and almost shied away from it to a certain degree. And I think that hurt him in the end. Wilks being a Panther and knowing Panthers culture and what it's about and what it means to be a Panther, that's going to carry him a long way with these young players and the guys like Shaq Thompson that have been here before with Ron Rivera and others. And they know what Panther culture is too. They were here for the good times. They know it. So I think that they've hit a nerve. They've hit something, and maybe not on purpose, but they've hit something that, again, I feel like they're a dangerous team right now because nobody knows what they're going to do. Would not surprise me at all if they won by 20 or won by 3. I have no idea. So we'll see when they roll the ball out on Sunday.
Yeah, anything could happen there. Panthers offense so far has been the part of the team that's really struggled. So far, 26th in points and last in the league in total yardage. That could change, obviously, with a change of quarterback and a change in offensive philosophy. But the Panthers' weapons, they did trade away Christian McCaffrey, obviously one of their biggest weapons in the receiving game, not just the run game, and Robbie Anderson, who hadn't been utilized super well, but was still like a top 3 receiver on this team. Now the Panthers rolling, of course, with DJ Moore, who Falcons fans know very well. Terrace Marshall, who's had to take on a bigger role along with Shi Smith. And then, of course, Tommy Tremble, who's been a key cog in the passing game as well. What do you think about this Panthers passing attack going up against now a very injured Falcons secondary? AJ Terrell almost certainly not going to play. Casey Hayward already on IR, and safety Jalen Hawkins has already been declared out with his concussion from last week. So the Falcons are banged up back there. What do you think about this Panthers passing attack maybe getting a little bit going here.
I don't. Well, PJ Walker's not going to throw for 400 yards like that. He's not going to go out there and have a Justin Herbert, Pat Mahomes type of game or whatever. Joe Burrow. That's not the kind of quarterback he is. And that's not the kind of offense they're running. But I do expect them to take some shots down the field. With the secondary being injured the way that they are, it'd be kind of foolhardy to not do it. They're still going to run first. Like the beauty of having a defensive-minded head coach is that he's going to try to help his defense out as much as possible. And the best way to do that is to keep them off the field. So the longer they can run drives and end with scores, surprisingly, the Panthers are like 3rd or 4th in the league in red zone rate right now. Granted, we don't get there very often, but
when you do, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. When we get there, we're getting in there some way. We're going to get some kind of points. But I do think that overall, this is one of those games, like I said earlier, this is one of those games where the Panthers can kind of plant their flag and be like, okay, this is what we're going to be like for the rest of the year. Like this is the tone, this is the intent, this is what we are, this is what we're going to do. I don't expect them to revert back or change things too much from what we saw last week. You keep going with what works till somebody stops it. And I don't know if Atlanta's equipped to completely stop it with the injuries they have on defense right now. So I'd like to see a little sprinkling of RPO or play action pass so they can exploit that secondary, suck all these guys in with the run game and, boom, throw over top of them. And I think that's kind of going to be the game plan. Doesn't have to be tricky or a lot of motion or all that stuff. Sometimes the best football is just simple line up and hit the guy in front of you and win that assignment and then do it again and do it again and do it again. And I think that's what Steve Wilks is kind of preaching to these guys. We've been close so many times before. Now, won't we just make sure we're over each time? So it's going to be interesting. I'm very interested to see this team come out this Sunday and see if they can keep rolling the way they did last week.
Yeah, and you talk about the Panthers rushing game. It hasn't been terribly productive. They've also barely run it, right? They're 30th in attempts on the ground right now.
That goes with what I was saying, though.
Exactly. It could be very different. Yeah. Yes, they are 23rd in yards, so they're better on a per carry basis than the number of attempts would suggest. But Chuba Hubbard has missed 2 practices now. Seems like his availability is in serious doubt. That would leave Deontay Foreman as the starter. And I think Raheem Blackshear is the 3rd running back.
Yeah.
He hasn't gotten a lot of carries, but I know Panthers fans have been sort of excited to see him. I think he's one of your returners too. So they do have another running back in there that is at least interesting. And I think the strongest part of the Panthers offense has been the offensive line and their run blocking ability. Those guys have done a great job. Even though the pass pro hasn't always been great, the run blocking has been. Kind of reminds me of the Falcons offensive line this year, honestly. But yeah, how do you feel about that run game going up against the Falcons run defense, which is actually pretty good, 5th in yardage allowed. They haven't faced a ton of attempts. They are closer to like a little bit above average in terms of yards per carry allowed. But how do you feel about that matchup? Because like you said, it could be a very different Carolina offense, more run focused going forward.
I think that the offensive line, now that Bozeman's taken over at center, has the potential to be a top 10 unit in the league for real. Like I really do. If you look down the line itself, you've got Ike Ekwonu, a top-rated rookie who has been on Pro Football Focus's list like the past 4 or 5 weeks with just stellar play, stepping in at left tackle. You got Brady Christensen beside him at left guard, who was the highest-rated left tackle coming out of the draft last year from out of Brigham Young. You've put Bozeman in at center, who played at Baltimore, so he understands the run game. At right guard, you've got Austin Corbett, came from the Rams, and then you've got Taylor Moton on the right tackle side, and he was our all-pro. So it's like you get them going together as a unit, and you get what happened last week. Carolina rushed 27 times last week, whereas there was a couple of times earlier on where they might have rushed only like 8 times or something like that the entire game. I've never understood football teams that do that, where they just completely forget that they have a run game. The very first week, matter of fact, it was almost like they forgot Christian McCaffrey was on the team. Like he just wasn't getting the ball. Like Baker wasn't throwing it to him. They weren't handing the ball to him. He's healthy. He's right there. And you had him in bubble wrap all preseason so he wouldn't get injured. Just did not use him week 1 pretty much. So that stat's a little skewed in terms of how much Carolina wants to run. I would think it's going to be more along the lines of what we saw last week against Tampa, where they probably want to get near 30, 35, 40 if they can rushes per game. Because if they're at that point, that means they are controlling the line of scrimmage and they are actually moving chains by running the ball, which is keeping the defense fresh. So I'm going to give it to the Carolina offensive line in this one, because I feel like that's one of the, besides the secondary, they've probably become the strongest unit on the team, and they're going to dictate the way the team plays. Like, they're going to be the ones that set the tone for the offense and the defense, and I think they know that. So they take pride in that. So I'll go with the Carolina Panthers offensive line in that matchup.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I agree that the Falcons' run defense never looked all that dangerous, but whenever they've sort of gotten teams to try to run against them, they've had a lot more success than when teams have tried to pass the ball a lot against them. So, statistically, it checks out, because the Falcons are very, very bad at defending the pass. But they've been very good at beating teams at their own game. Teams that like San Francisco and Cleveland, and we thought Seattle was like that, of course, with their run game. They're a little bit more pass heavy than expected, certainly. But
Chino, man, Chino's playing great.
Yeah, he's crushing it. So I'm interested to see how it shakes out if it gets into a trench battle with two teams trying to run it. So far, the Falcons have basically beaten all the teams that have tried to do it better than them head to head. But this is a new look Panthers team. I know there's a lot of excitement around them. So definitely more. I'm glad this game is like becoming a little bit more interesting, because with Rule at the helm, it would probably be like it would just be depressing, and you'd have to come on here and be like, well, I'm just waiting for Rule to get fired, sort of like Falcons fans were in 2020. And it's like no excitement, no fun. It's much better, I think, to have a matchup like this where you've got a team that is more interesting and more exciting, certainly more fun to cover when it's like that.
Oh my gosh. Plus the way the division is, like, it's literally we're in week 8. And it's anybody's ball game. Like, there's no one can sit here and tell me they know without a shadow of a doubt that such and such team is going to win this division, because it's just so wide open. There's so many games left to play. But it's just wild to me that through all this, the first couple of weeks of the year, if Carolina can win on Sunday and Tampa loses on Thursday night,
then the Panthers are number 1. Yeah,
they're number 1 in the division after starting 1-5. Like,
because they've won all their games against division opponents.
Yeah, they'll be 3-0 in the division.
Matters. Yeah,
it's just wow. It's just insane to me. So, the whole mantra of keep pounding. That's for real. Like this year, like that, they gotta live by that. They gotta keep pushing through it. And shout out to the fans who have stuck with them and haven't abandoned them over the past couple of weeks, because now those fans are going to try to rush to get back on the bus. I do feel like they have hit a reset in Charlotte, and that we'll see a completely different team. The stats are going to even out while the year's over with, but the next couple of weeks, the stats aren't going to tell the true story, and hopefully that'll allow the Panthers to sneak up on some teams and be like, gotcha. You thought we were going to do this because of the stats. That's not what we're even doing anymore. So, like, we'll see. We'll see what they can do.
Yeah, we will see indeed. Thank you so much, Desmond, for coming on today. Good preview. Everyone should have plenty to chew on heading into Sunday's matchup. I think this would be both teams' third division game so far. So, like you said, with Carolina winning 2 division games, that's the only games they've won. But if this division's bad, that might be the only ones they need to win. Just sweep the division, and you're all good. So
we're good to go. I'll take it.
Yeah, guys. He is Desmond Johnson, host of the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast. He's on Twitter at Des_3505. Anything else you'd like to plug, Desmond?
No, that's enough. That's plenty.
Okay, gotcha.
Enough. You guys find us on the Bleav in Carolina Panthers podcast. We're on twice a week. It's myself, Jonathan Stewart, the all-time Panthers leading rusher, and Skylar Callahan, the beat writer for the Carolina Panthers for Sports Illustrated. So we can get you in the building, out the building, player perspective, whatever you need. We're interactive. We do the shows live, so fans can ask questions. We did an open mailbag earlier today. Matter of fact, that went really well. So we have a good time. So definitely stop by, check us out. Maybe we bring Kev on in 2 weeks, because we're going to see you guys again.
Yeah.
In the next couple of weeks anyway. So maybe we set up something then. So we'll
absolutely.
See.
Yeah, guys. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. You can find me there at Falcoholic Kevin on the Twitters. Check out thefalcoholic.com for all that tremendous written content. If you're listening to the audio of this, please give us that 5-star review. We appreciate that. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. You can also check us out on Patreon if you want to support the show. It's patreon.com/falcoholiclive. Get early access to all the podcast episodes, ad-free as well, along with some other special perks. But until next time, guys, we'll see you after this game on Sunday for our post-game show on the Falcoholic Live. Until then, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next time. Have a great day, folks.